Hey guys, tonight we're diving into a place where the coffee's hot, the manners are hotter, and the wrong eyebrow raise could spark a silent war. You're in an 18th-century Persian coffee house. The lanterns flicker low, the carpets smell like centuries of spilled secrets, and that guy across the room? Yeah, he's been watching you since you stepped in. But don't panic, unless, of course, you forget to bow to the cat sleeping on the shelf. That's a real faux pas. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, post your location and local time in the comments, let's see how far this sleepy caravan stretches. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge through the winding alleys of Isfahan, lanternlight pooling on slick stones, the call to prayer still echoing faintly in the distance. There's a hush in the air, the kind that settles in just after midnight. Then, there it is. A weathered wooden sign creaks above a low stone doorway. No name, of course. These places don't advertise. You just have to know. Inside, you're met with the scent of damp wool, ash, cardamom, and something unmistakably bitter, freshly brewed kava. Not coffee, in the European sense, this is thick, dark, nearly chewy. You could spoon it into a brick and start a revolution. Some might say it tastes like enlightenment. Others would say it tastes like dirt that's been blessed. The room is dim, almost sepia-toned, with oil lamps giving everything a golden smudge. Carpets layer the floor like molasses poured over tile. You brush past the beaded curtain and enter a space that's equal parts sanctuary and stage. You don't sit yet. Rookie mistake. In a Persian coffee house, your place isn't chosen by comfort, it's chosen by status, reputation, or who you arrived with. There's an unspoken chart: if you're anyone, people already know where you belong. If you're no one, well, better not hover too close to the fire. A boy barely taller than the hookah pipe he carries gestures with his chin. That's your spot. On a faded cushion between two middle-aged men who immediately pretend not to see you. This is part of the dance. Everyone's always pretending not to see anyone, unless there's a scandal. A slow melody hums from somewhere in the back. A setter, perhaps. Its notes are less music, more suggestion. Everything here is suggested, meanings, glances, even insults. Directness is frowned upon, unless you're reciting a poem, which is ironic, given how direct Persian poetry can be. But even then, metaphor is armor. Across the room, a man with a heavy turban and heavier brow sips silently, never blinking. He's known to quote Rumi while throwing dice. You've heard whispers that he once convinced a local magistrate that logic itself was heretical. Possibly true. Possibly a misheard joke. On the far cushion, an old man with one eye sits beside a parrot in a tiny vest. The parrot nods each time someone speaks, as if silently judging every syllable. The man doesn't talk. The parrot, allegedly, does. The walls are cracked tile, glazed with a blue that's faded like memory. Above the shelves of chipped porcelain cups sit dusty jars, cinnamon sticks, dried rose petals, maybe even crushed deer musk if you're lucky, or cursed. Historians still argue whether certain spices used here were for flavor or mystical hallucination. Honestly, both are possible. You finally receive your cup. It's tiny. It's absurdly hot. And somehow, it weighs a ton. The design is floral, delicate, but you sense that hurling it at someone mid-argument wouldn't even chip the glaze. That's probably happened more than once. You sip. And boom, your tongue is hijacked by bitterness, sweetness, and a pinch of something that feels like betrayal. This is coffee not meant for multitasking. You don't drink it while checking scrolls or writing memos. This is full attention coffee. Eyes closed, soul searching, possibly summoning something coffee. Around you, murmurs rise and fall like waves. Names are dropped in whispers: poets, clerics, rebels. Some of them are the same person, That's how things go here. 1 minute, you're admired for your eloquence. The next, you're publicly stoned for heresy. A single poem can do both. The ceiling's wooden beams creak occasionally, as if reacting to the stories told below. Someone's arguing about a horse trade gone wrong. Another man corrects a historical date from a tale mid-performance. Not because it matters, but because being right in a room like this is its own kind of currency. Someone farts. Loudly. No one flinches. That, too, is etiquette. What happens in the corner stays in the corner, unless, of course, the parrot repeats it. Which it probably will, tomorrow. A server walks by with a tray of impossibly tiny sweets. Baklava, dates, something that might be a fig but could be a prank. They aren't for you. Don't reach. Those were paid for, quietly, with a nod and a palm slide. You didn't nod. Your palms are empty. You shift slightly. The cushion exhales dust. You sneeze. That's a faux pas. You've disturbed the rhythm. The man to your right raises an eyebrow. He now knows everything he needs to know about you. In a corner, a boy begins to recite a ghazal. He's young, nervous. The room softens its noise by 10%. Not silence, never that, but a respectful haze of semi-attention. He misquotes a line. The one-eyed man sighs. The parrot tuts. You're part of the crowd now. Not a guest. Not quite a regular. But you've earned your spot, for tonight. There's a kind of dignity in being invisible here, in blending into the drifting smoke, the layered conversation, the slow brewing silence. Somewhere in the back, an old kettle begins to hiss. The next round's coming. You brace yourself. This isn't just coffee anymore. It's a test. You're still on that cushion, more flattened and fluffed, and the coffee's cooled just enough to burn less. The hum of the room wraps itself around you like an old blanket, scratchy but oddly comforting. This isn't a place you visit for comfort, though. It's a performance, a pressure cooker with velvet curtains. Every movement, every breath, is graded, silently, ruthlessly, and, worst of all, artistically. You shift your legs, trying not to creak the wood beneath you. The seating arrangement here. It's a map of the invisible. You might think it's random, a swirl of men in robes and turbans nestled into carpeted corners. But it's more orchestrated than a royal procession. You are where you are because of who you are, or, more likely, who you're not. Directly in the center, by the samovar, sit the elder poets. Not because they own the place or pay more, though they probably do, but because they have earned a reputation for saying devastating things with pleasant rhymes. No one dares interrupt them unless they want their personal failings turned into a couplet. And yes, that's happened. Frequently. Closer to the door are the newcomers and the socially expendable. If you're seated here, you're either on probation or simply forgettable. It's not a punishment exactly, it's just the coffee house reminding you, you haven't earned your second cup yet. You're near the fire, but not too near. A safe middle distance. People can glance at you without committing. You might be someone. Or you might be someone's annoying cousin. Time will tell. Across the room, a man arrives late. His robe is deep green, crisp. He removes his shoes with a kind of reverence. Then, instead of waiting for a seat, he nods, just once, and is instantly offered space between two merchant-looking types. That nod? It's a key. A passport. He has rank. Or reputation. Or both. The fire crackles as the server with the tragic mustache passes him a cup without asking. No menu. No exchange. The server just knows. That's the kind of service no coin can buy. It's earned through years of quietly outwitting louder men. In Persian coffee houses, seating isn't just about comfort, it's about submission. You submit to the room. To its logic. to its choreography. The very act of choosing your own spot is a social misdemeanor. It says, "I don't know how this works," which is the same as saying, "I'm not worth listening to." Some nights, a man may be called forward from the back, elevated by a story he told, or an insult well delivered, or a poem that made the right elder smile. Other nights, a man is quietly ushered away from the fire, his seat occupied the next evening by someone with a fresher anecdote or better cheekbones. This fluidity gives the coffee house its tension. It's both rigid and mercurial. Historians still argue whether this was a reflection of Persian social hierarchy or a clever reversal of it, a place where the street sweeper could dethrone the noble with a joke, a rhyme, or a well-timed belch. Your current seat. It says, "Watch, learn, stay quiet unless you've got something dazzling." A good rule for many things in life, honestly. Suddenly, the man beside you adjusts his cushion with exaggerated flair. This is an invitation. Or a threat. Possibly both. You turn slightly. He says nothing. Just flicks his eyes toward the far end of the room where a new guest has entered. She isn't a woman, of course not here, but she's wearing enough perfume to announce herself like one. The room twitches. Someone coughs deliberately. The new arrival is a youth, slim, robed in silver, eyeliner barely visible but absolutely there. The coffee house rules say, "No women," but they don't say, "No ambiguities." That's etiquette loophole number 27. He, she, they, take a seat next to the one-eyed man. No one blinks. This happens often enough that it's a category. A known variable. But still, the ripple moves through the room like heat through smoke. The server reappears, same mustache, different tray, and begins the coffee ritual again. It's not just a pour. It's a performance. He stands tall, arm outstretched, holding the dalla above his head while the cup sits below at knee level. The stream arcs like a ribbon. Not one drop is spilled. Everyone watches. Not because it's exciting, but because not watching would be rude. Pouring coffee here is like a ballet with burns. The closer the stream lands to the cup's edge without overflow, the more respect the pourer gets. Miss the mark, and you're a meme by morning, if memes existed in 1723. You receive your second cup. It arrives without eye contact, without speech. Just the gentle clink of ceramic and a puff of steam. This is a promotion. You've been seen. Noticed. Approved. Your posture must be improving. You straighten a little, instantly regret it, and slouch back into the exact level of nonchalance required. Confidence is fine. Arrogance is fatal. To your left, someone adjusts their turban, a move that means, "I'm about to say something important." And sure enough, he launches into a tale about a journey to Shiraz, an unfortunate misunderstanding with a caravan, and a camel with very specific tastes in footwear. The room chuckles politely. You follow suit, 2 seconds behind, just enough to show you understand but weren't trying too hard. Social timing is more important than actual wit. Every so often, someone claps, once. Not applause. Just punctuation. It marks the end of a story or the death of a tangent. If you hear 2 claps, someone's either mocking or summoning a server. Triple claps. Never. That's code for, someone's passed out or summoned a djinn. You sip again. This cup is stronger. The bitterness has bite now. Somewhere between medicine and memory. Your tongue tingles. Not unpleasantly. A small boy scurries past, collecting empty cups. His vest is too big, and he hums a song from a local puppet play. You wonder how long he's worked here. 12. 13. He probably knows more secrets than the city guards. And unlike the parrot, he doesn't repeat them. As the fire dies down a little, cushions are subtly rearranged. New arrivals are gently folded into the hierarchy. Nothing is said. No one asks, "Mind if I sit here?" They just know. And now, you do too. You're starting to read the room, its unspoken codes, its rhythm. You've become part of its breathing. Not important, yet. But not invisible either. There's an art to sitting down here. It's the beginning of being seen. Of being heard. Of maybe, someday, being the one who claps first. The room has shifted again. You can't quite explain how, but you feel it in your spine. It's in the way the server moves, slower now, more reverent. The chatter softens to a low thrum, like bees murmuring secrets inside a wall. You follow their glances toward the raised platform in the back corner. This, you now realize, is the moment of the evening. A man emerges from behind a curtain. His robe is plain, but his presence isn't. He walks like someone who knows that even the floor respects him. His beard is snowy but trimmed, his eyes like twin black olives dipped in lamp oil. The parrot bobs in approval. You're witnessing the storyteller's entrance, an institution inside the institution. You wouldn't guess it now, but storytelling in Persian coffee houses was once considered borderline heretical by some. Too much influence, too many whispers. Historians still argue whether these storytellers were preserving culture or subtly undermining it. Either way, you can already tell this man could make you cry over a broken spoon. He doesn't announce himself. He simply clears his throat, gently, and the coffee house stills. Even the fire hushes. The storyteller leans forward, squinting slightly, scanning the room. He's not just choosing where to begin, he's choosing who to aim at. These tales are weapons, and the safest seats are behind him. He begins. His voice is low, almost lazy, like he's pouring honey down the side of a jar. He tells of Rostam, the mighty warrior, but not the version you remember. No, this version has more sarcasm, more wine, and at least one unfortunate incident with a goat. The story weaves between myth and mockery, reverence and rebellion. That's the thing about these coffeehouse stories, they're always a remix. No tale is sacred, not even the epics. Especially not the epics. And in that irreverence lies the real magic. Everyone knows the bones of the story, but the flesh. That's different every time. You glance around. Grown men are grinning like children. A merchant, rough from the bazaar, wipes a tear from his beard. Even the serious man in the corner, the one who earlier didn't blink, allows the edge of his mouth to twitch upward. This is a sacred moment. Not religious, exactly. But spiritual, in the way an inside joke can be. There's a structure to these performances, a long build, peppered with suspense, unexpected poetry, sly winks at politics. But the real jewel is ta'aruf, that famous Persian etiquette of deference and verbal dance. The storyteller slips into it naturally, wrapping compliments around barbs, letting the audience feel clever for catching the subtext. He glances at the youth in the silver robe and tosses a line their way. Something about beauty being a burden, especially if one's eyebrows are better groomed than the king's. Laughter erupts. The youth raises a cup in mock salute. The storyteller bows slightly, then pivots into a digression about palace gossip, of course entirely fictional, except for how everyone knows which real noble he's skewering. And just like that, it's no longer a story. It's a commentary. A mirror angled sideways. A truth so well hidden in humor that even the offended would have to laugh, or pretend they didn't understand. The coffee house thrives on this kind of performance. It's how the common man vents. The more clever the insult, the more noble the victim, the safer it is to repeat it. And if you ever get caught quoting something treasonous, just say it was part of a story. No harm in stories. There's a brief pause while the storyteller sips water, and the crowd does what it always does in these silences, digests. People lean in, whisper interpretations. One man insists that line about the goat was about the city governor's tax policies. Another says it was just a line about a goat. A third mutters that it's clearly a coded reference to a banned Sufi order. There's no answer, of course. That's the point. The ambiguity is the shield. The more meanings a story has, the safer it becomes. You could be offended or enlightened. You choose. The parrot chirps once, then mimics the storyteller's earlier phrase, "Ah, but the moon cannot blush." It gets a bigger laugh than the original line. A child somewhere snorts with laughter. The storyteller nods at the parrot as though granting it a license to steal his thunder. He's nearing the end now. You can tell because the music starts again, soft, the setter in the shadows picking up its thread like a weaver rejoining an old pattern. The tale twists towards something solemn. A warrior betrayed. A lover misunderstood. A king who weeps alone, not because he lost a war, but because he won it at the cost of friendship. You sit in stillness, surprised by how moved you are. The story doesn't belong to you, and yet it finds you. Like the coffee, it's bitter, strange, oddly familiar. And then, a final line. A poem. Just a couplet. He who drinks truth must sip in lies. For naked truths meet shuttered eyes. The room stays quiet for just a breath longer than necessary. That's how you know it landed. Then applause, soft, deliberate, never thunderous. This is not the theater. It's reverence disguised as routine. The storyteller bows, not deeply, then fades behind the curtain again, disappearing like smoke up a flue. You exhale, finally aware you hadn't for several minutes. The merchant next to you mutters, he's lost none of his teeth. A compliment. In this world, to lose your teeth is to lose your bite, your ability to cut through the nonsense. It's clear now, the storyteller is the apex of the room's social pyramid. Not the richest, not the most powerful, but the most dangerous. In a room built on etiquette, he dances on its rules and comes out celebrated. That takes more than talent. That takes fluency in the unsaid. A new round of coffee arrives, darker than before. Possibly the third pour, legendary for including aniseed and, if rumors are true, just a touch of powdered wild rue. Hallucinogenic? Probably not. But strong enough to make you rethink that goat subplot. The room resumes its buzz. The fire is poked back to life. Stories begin again, but smaller now, splinters of the tale just heard. You hear someone retelling the betrayal scene, already tweaking it for tomorrow's audience. Because that's what stories do here. They don't just get told. They evolve, mutate, survive. They are etiquette's secret weapon, wrapping truths in entertainment, rebellion in rhyme. You lean back, head swirling with story and spice. This isn't just a coffee house. It's a theater without curtains, a court without laws, a parliament of poets and parrots. And you've just passed through its most sacred rite. Your fingers trace the rim of your coffee cup, still warm, still bitter. Around you, the coffee house begins its slow, quiet bloom again. The tension of performance gives way to the soothing lull of post-story digestion. Conversations unfurl like smoke from the hookahs now being passed around, each puff carrying with it philosophy, insult, and sometimes just idle wheezing. But you notice something more intricate happening beneath the surface chatter. This isn't random talk. No. This is conversation by code, etiquette sharpened into an art form. Every phrase has a shadow. Every question hides a dare. Welcome to the linguistic minefield of Persian ta'aruf, that elaborate, exasperating, and occasionally passive-aggressive etiquette dance that no one fully understands but everyone performs like it's breathing. Someone gestures to offer you another cup. You decline, automatically. They insist, equally automatic. You protest again, with a smile. They insist a second time. You refuse more emphatically now, practically clutching your chest. They force the cup into your hand like it's their duty to keep you hydrated and caffeinated or die trying. Congratulations. You've just completed level 1 of ta'aruf. This ritual isn't about the coffee. It's about positioning, honor, humility. To accept something immediately would be rude. To offer only once would be insulting. Historians still argue whether ta'aruf developed as a survival mechanism in a society built on hierarchy, or whether it was a backlash to it, etiquette as an equalizer, everyone pretending to be equally unworthy. It's everywhere. A merchant quotes you a price, you know you must object, not because it's too high but because to accept it would mean you don't understand the game. A host offers you a seat, you must decline at least once, even if your legs are dissolving into soup. A poet praises your turban, you respond with self-deprecation so eloquent it deserves its own stanza. You overhear a trio nearby practicing advanced ta'aruf. Please, sit closer to the fire. No, you must, your wisdom needs warmth. I insist. My presence would dishonor such brightness. It's unclear if anyone actually moves. But the ritual is performed. And that's the whole point. The great secret is, no one means what they say. But they mean it deeply. Of course, the system has its dangers. Say no too softly, and you'll find yourself with a third cup of coffee, a complimentary shawl, and a camel rental you never asked for. Say yes too early, and you risk appearing greedy, or worse, foreign. Ta'aruf makes simple things complex and complex things, even more complex. But once you learn its rhythm, you start to feel the flow of Persian hospitality underneath. It's a coded language of mutual respect, where everyone pretends to be poor so that everyone can feel rich in manners. You see it play out again as a young man attempts to leave. He rises, bows, thanks everyone too much. 3 older men rise with him, insisting he must stay. One clutches his robe theatrically. The boy sits down again, now cemented to his cushion by sheer guilt. He's not going anywhere for another half hour. Even the parrot gets in on it, mimicking a high-pitched, please, after you, followed by a squawk that suspiciously sounds like sarcasm. In the corner, 2 scholars begin a discussion about Persian architecture, but it's really about one-upping each other's education. Their voices stay calm, even musical, but the words drip with implications. The dome in Yazd, unmatched, surely. Unmatched, unless, of course, one has seen the true form of symmetry in Kashan. Ah, but Kashan's beauty lies more in illusion than precision. You sip quietly. This is better than chess. Ta'aruf also governs apology. Someone bumps into another patron. The apology is delivered not just once but 3 different ways. Forgive me, I am the clumsiest of fools, may your ancestors be spared the shame of my misstep. The offended party bows and replies, please, the fault is mine for having feet, then adds, may your shadow never lessen. No actual emotions are exchanged. Just pure, refined etiquette. It's like fencing, but with poetry instead of swords. Sometimes, though, you can spot the cracks. A man in the back, overly perfumed, a little too loud, insists on footing the entire evening's bill. His words are ta'aruf, but his tone says performance. No one challenges him, but you sense it, a slight narrowing of the storyteller's eyes, the way the server's smile stops just before the eyes join in. Because ta'aruf isn't about showing off. It's about showing you know how to pretend not to show off. There's a difference. A big one. Another guest enters, middle-aged, slightly out of breath, with dust on his sleeves. He offers apologies for his lateness, even though no one asked. He bows 5 times, offers to leave if he's a disturbance. It's textbook ta'aruf, except no one buys it. You can tell by how no one offers him a better seat. They nod, they smile, but they don't move. Sometimes ta'aruf says, you're welcome here. Sometimes, it says, we'll let you pretend you are. Still, when done well, it's beautiful. A verbal ballet. A way of keeping the sharpness of daily life sheathed in silk. Even insults arrive gift-wrapped. A man beside you mutters about a rival's poetry, his verses are as delicate as the breeze that carries sewage from the South Canal. A pause. A sip. A nod. You can't help but smirk. And that's the magic, in a world of limited power, where truth is sometimes dangerous, how you say things becomes more important than what you say. The etiquette is the message. It creates a stage where every interaction is part flattery, part duel. The coffee house thrives on this rhythm. It allows strangers to converse, enemies to coexist, and friends to insult each other artfully. It's a game you never win, but winning was never the point. You glance at your cup, empty again. A server approaches, tilts his tray. You hesitate. He hesitates. You both know the dance has begun. The evening has taken on that velvet quality, the kind where shadows deepen and everything glows gold from within. You notice the lanterns have been trimmed with a practiced hand, flames steady, light just dim enough to invite secrets. It's the perfect time for a game of backgammon. Or as the Persians call it, nard. You're waved over to a board already in play. It's old, gorgeously worn, the carvings on the wood rubbed smooth by decades of elbows and drama. The checkers are made of walnut and bone, each one lightly grooved, like tiny thumbprints of history. The dice? Handmade. Imperfect. But if anyone notices, they politely pretend not to. Your opponent grins with the kind of confidence you've only seen in hustlers and uncles at weddings. He gestures for you to roll first. Of course you protest, Taraf demands it, but he insists, theatrically, and the game begins. Backgammon isn't just a game here. It's a performance of wits wrapped in probability and silent judgment. The rules are ancient, traced as far back as Sasanian Persia, when kings played nard not just to pass time but to prove strategic might. Historians still argue whether the game originated in Persia or India, or whether it spontaneously erupted in every region that's ever had both leisure time and petty men. Your first few moves are unremarkable. You try to look indifferent, like you're just pushing pieces around and not calculating how to block that smug little leap your opponent keeps preparing. He chuckles. The game is on. Conversation blooms around the board, but it's a particular kind, the lazy insults and backhanded praise that belong to those who enjoy losing almost as much as winning. Almost. You move like a minister, slow, expensive, and with no clear purpose. My dear, even your dice seem hesitant to help you. One player casually sips tea, eyes half-lidded, and murmurs, "Ah, fortune is a courtesan tonight." And clearly, you have not paid her well. Everyone chuckles. You try not to feel personally attacked. The game picks up speed. The bones click like castanets against the wood. Checkers leap forward, dodge, fall behind. It's part strategy, part divine comedy. 1 minute you're in control, the next you're staring at two blots and an opponent with the smugness of someone who's already composing a victory poem in his head. You begin to see the real artistry behind the board. Each move is an invitation, a trap, a dare. The best players aren't the ones who win quickly, but the ones who make losing feel graceful. That, you realize, is also etiquette. Nearby, a group watches a different game, but they aren't watching the board. They're watching faces. In Persian backgammon, expressions tell the real story. The sigh, the raised brow, the exaggerated head shake, it's all part of the theater. You begin to understand why poets and politicians alike adore the game, it's pure metaphor. The dice are cast again. A double six. Gasps. Your opponent winks. It appears my ancestors have decided to intervene, he says. You respond by dramatically fanning yourself with a napkin. The crowd laughs. You might be losing, but at least you're losing with flair. A server walks past, balancing a tray of steaming dates and pistachios. He pauses just long enough to whisper, he always rolls lucky after the fourth cup, then disappears before you can ask whether it's superstition or scandal. You decide not to roll a fourth cup. Just in case. But the game's not all friendly fire and fainting couches. Underneath the wit, there's a deep, almost mystical respect for the game itself. Nard isn't just pastime, its philosophy. A symbol of fate and free will. Each roll, a metaphor. Each move, a reminder that life is half planning and half shrugging at the dice. There's an old Persian saying, to master nard is to accept that the gods cheat. You're starting to see what they mean. In the background, a poet recites verses while someone else counters with humorous couplets. It blends beautifully with the rhythm of the dice, words and clacks in sync, like jazz. And then, you win. No one's more surprised than you. It's a narrow victory, pulled from the jaws of mathematical certainty. Your opponent stares at the board, then at you, then breaks into a slow clap. It's half sarcastic, half genuine. I have been undone by a master of disguise, he intones. May your fortune cool and solidify in your next round. You bow with exaggerated humility. I am but the dice's pawn. He leans closer. Don't let it go to your head. It's bad form to gloat, unless it's poetic. You're immediately handed a slice of paper and a piece of charcoal. Apparently, tradition dictates that the victor compose a couplet. You scribble down something safe and non-committal. A polite poem. You hope it rhymes. Someone reads it aloud and nods. You're safe, for now. Later, two men argue over a particularly brutal match. Not about the game itself, but the mood in which it was played. One insists the other was too clinical, stripping the soul from the board. The other defends his style, I play like a surgeon. Precision is art. The first man scoffs. Then your game belongs in a hospital, not a coffee house. No punches thrown. Just poetry and judgment. By now, the air is thick with smoke and stories, sugar and salt. A woman enters, older, draped in navy with coins at her wrists, and takes a seat at the back. The crowd parts slightly. She's a known gambler, it seems. One man mutters, she once beat a prince and left him with only metaphors. She sets up her own board. No fuss. Her opponent is already sweating. As you stand to leave the game circle, someone claps you on the back. Not bad, they say. But let's see if your tea pouring is as lucky as your dice. You nod, smile, and step back into the warm, ever-shifting tide of this living room of the city, where even leisure is layered with language, metaphor, and the subtle thrill of being outwitted over and over again, while pretending you aren't. You slip away from the gaming circle, the memory of the dice still tingling in your fingers. But even as laughter trails behind you, something quieter calls. Somewhere deeper in the room, tucked between hanging tapestries and shelves of battered books, is the realm of the readers, the quiet corner where ink reigns supreme and conversation drops to a reverent whisper. Here, the coffee house becomes a library with legs. You notice that the men gathered in this shadowy corner aren't just sipping tea, they're devouring it alongside lines of Hafez, Rumi, and Sadi. Loose pages rustle like leaves in a breeze of thought. One old man balances a candle precariously close to his scroll as though daring the words to burn brighter. You ease onto a floor cushion near a low table strewn with manuscripts. Your spine finds the groove carved by 1,000 others before you. Someone hands you a volume, leather-bound, slightly cracked, and soaked in the musk of history. You hold it carefully, as if it might disintegrate if you blink too hard. This is the poetry corner, where silence isn't awkward but sacred. You open the book. It's Persian script, delicate and flowing, each word like an arabesque in ink. You may not read it fluently, but the shape of the lines carries a rhythm you feel more than understand. A man beside you whispers a translation. Even after all this time, the sun never says to the earth, "You owe me." Look what happens with a love like that, it lights the whole sky. You both sit with that for a while. No commentary needed. The coffee house doesn't rush you. Time here is more like soup, slow, warm, and occasionally spilling over. These literary salons didn't just happen by chance. During the 18th century, Persian coffee houses became sanctuaries for poets and thinkers who couldn't find space in royal courts or religious schools. Here, beneath lantern light and behind steaming cups, they found their audience: shoemakers, tailors, traders, men who couldn't write a poem but could feel one. Historians still argue whether these gatherings democratized Persian literature or diluted it. But there's no doubt, this was where culture brewed as much as coffee. A young man stands to recite. He's nervous, which makes sense. His beard barely qualifies as stubble, and the crowd before him looks like they've seen dynasties rise and fall. But he bows deeply, clears his throat, and begins. His voice is clear. His poem is simple. It's about waiting, about watching a pomegranate ripen and wondering if sweetness can ever arrive without cracking open first. The older men nod. One softly hums. The reciter finishes, bows again, and sinks back to the floor, cheeks burning with pride or caffeine. Possibly both. Someone claps. Just once. But it's enough. In this place, poetry isn't for fame. It's a currency of the soul. A way to say, here, this is how I survived today. Across from you, an old storyteller sharpens his reed pen. You glance at his page and realize, he's not writing poetry. He's copying it. Carefully. Line by line. You ask why. He shrugs. Some poems ask to be remembered with the hand. Another man chimes in, or maybe he's just avoiding his wife. They both laugh, but you sense truth in both answers. There's an ongoing debate in one corner about whether Rumi's verses are too mystical to be practical. One man insists that metaphors are a form of cowardice. Another replies that direct speech is the hobby of goats. A third offers nothing but a shrug and recites a line about the moon being jealous of a lover's eyebrow. The discussion ends in a draw. Or maybe in awe. It's hard to tell the difference here. And poetry isn't limited to the classics. One fellow pulls out a crumpled note and begins reading a satire about his neighbor's camel, which, he claims, is more punctual than the town imam. The laughter is immediate and wheezy. Someone shouts, add that to the prayer schedule. Humor is welcomed, even treasured. These aren't stiff intellectuals. They're craftsmen of the human condition, unafraid to get poetic mud on their shoes. You ask one of the older men what makes a good Persian poem. He doesn't even pause, it must sting like truth and sweeten like dates. You make a mental note of that. From somewhere deeper in the coffee house, a servant brings a tray of rosewater and almond pastries. The readers accept them with practiced grace, using the pause to fold corners in their books or dip fingers in ink for the next stanza. And then someone sings. Not loudly. Not for applause. Just a tune, a verse set to an old melody. His voice is rough but warm, like burlap dipped in honey. The song tells of a garden that grows only when two lovers are apart. It shouldn't make sense, but it does. Somehow, heartbreak always sounds better in Farsi. The singer stops. A few nod. One man wipes a tear and pretends to have something in his eye. No one calls him out. This is the real value of the poetry corner. It makes space for emotion in a culture that often hides it behind etiquette and cleverness. It allows a man to cry over a metaphor and still be respected. You lean back, eyes half closed. Somewhere, a new stanza is being inked. Somewhere else, a line is being memorized for future heartbreaks. The lantern flickers. And for a moment, the only sound is the scratch of a pen, the hiss of a lamp, and the steady heartbeat of a people who still believe words can shape a world. You blink slowly, half dazed from the poetry fog. The scent of ink and rosewater still lingers in your nose as you ease away from the reading corner and back into the main body of the coffee house. And here, the tempo changes. No more whispers. Now it's all smoke, banter, and that familiar theatrical thunder. The storyteller has taken his chair. It's not a throne, but it might as well be. A simple raised platform, perhaps just a few stacked cushions and a woven rug, but it commands the whole room. Every eye is fixed, every pipe stilled mid-puff, every spoon paused over a bowl of nuts. You slip into a spot against the wall, the plaster cool behind you, your limbs folding easily into the hush. He begins, not with a bang, but with a voice so low and textured it feels like velvet on gravel. There once was a king with a mirror that never lied. And just like that, you're gone. The 18th-century Persian storyteller, called a naql, wasn't just entertainment. He was memory, morality, mischief, and sometimes even subtle rebellion wrapped in a beard and a booming voice. These tales, they were hand-me-downs from epics like the Shahnameh, stitched together with bits of neighborhood gossip, local superstitions, and yesterday's political frustration. You notice the crowd. It's not just old men with prayer beads. There are teenagers too, leaning forward, faces lit like candles. A couple of women, half-veiled, peeking from a curtained alcove. Even the tea-boys frozen mid-pour. The tale weaves on, a prince cursed to never see his reflection, a sorceress with a tear made of saffron, a leopard that guards a library of forgotten maps. None of it's historically accurate, and absolutely no one cares. It's the emotional truth that grips. Historians still argue whether the naqls were formal historians or folk performers, the man next to you whispers. But we all know who kept the memory of the people alive. The storyteller raises a hand, just one, and the room leans in. In the end, he growls, the prince learned that sometimes, the truest reflection is the one others hold up for you. There's a beat of silence. Then scattered applause, some soft claps, others just respectful nods. It's not the end of the performance. Just the end of that chapter. You learn quickly, coffee house storytelling is rarely a single sprint. It's a marathon spread over days. Listeners return night after night, eager for the next thread of the tapestry. And not every story is epic. Sometimes, the naql drops into anecdotes, funny tales of village idiots, boastful wrestlers, or a donkey that refuses to eat pomegranates on Thursdays. The absurdities are deliberate, stitched with layers. Every joke has a wink. Every laugh echoes with recognition. A merchant chuckles loudly at a tale about a miser who tried to charge rent for his own shadow. Reminds me of my cousin, he blurts out, and half the room groans in agreement. Then, out of nowhere, the storyteller shifts. His voice darkens, his tone sinks. He tells the story of a righteous man wrongly imprisoned, who taught his guards poetry until they cried while locking his chains. The room goes quiet. Even the tea simmers softer. And you realize something, this isn't just entertainment. It's therapy. The storyteller is a pressure valve in a world bursting with rules and hierarchy. Through his tales, grief gets voiced, corruption gets mocked, and hope slips in through the back door wearing a disguise. One tale dips into satire, lightly, but sharply. A mullah who declares coffee a sin, only to be caught hoarding it under his bed. The punchline? He was just trying to stay awake through his own sermons. The audience howls. Somewhere, someone coughs suspiciously. A scholarly debate rises near the edge of the room. Two men argue about whether the naql is misquoting Ferdowsi. One insists that a particular couplet was misplaced, that it belongs to Rostam's lament, not his triumph. The other rolls his eyes and says, poetry belongs to whoever recites it with heart. They agree to disagree. Or at least, they agree to keep drinking tea about it. Another tale begins. This one about a cobbler who outsmarts a tax collector using nothing but silence and his grandmother's cat. It's nonsense, but the kind that teaches. And wrapped in the ridiculous is a core of subversion. Wisdom doesn't always come from palaces. Sometimes, it wears patched sandals and smells like glue. You look around. Half the men here probably can't read. But they know these stories like they know the path home in the dark. Storytelling in the coffee house isn't just cultural. It's structural. It fills the space between religion and governance with something human. The naql becomes both archivist and artist, priest and prankster. One particularly fringe theory you overhear, some say the storytellers were unofficial spies. That they listened to complaints, gauged popular sentiment, and subtly adjusted their tales to warn the powers that be. No one really believes it, but no one fully dismisses it either. The best stories always leave a crack of possibility. As the tale winds down, the storyteller sips his tea. You half expect him to burst into rhyme mid-gulp. He doesn't. Instead, he thanks the audience, not for listening, but for remembering. Without you, he says, the stories die. And then we are just noise in a big, empty room. A hush follows that. Even the joke about the constipated horse that came right after doesn't quite erase it. You stretch your legs, feeling the tingle return. The stories have etched themselves into you. Not just in your ears, but in your breath, your skin. You'll leave tonight knowing more than when you came, even if you don't quite know what. And as you step away from the circle, you hear someone ask, will he tell the tale of the candle and the tiger tomorrow night? The answer, only if it rains. Naturally. The stories linger in your ears like echoes in a canyon. You feel them trail behind as you meander toward another corner of the coffee house, this one more physically grounded, but no less poetic. The scent shifts here. The smoke thickens. Not from tobacco, but from charcoal, spices, and something sweet, like dates frying in oil. You found the food. And in 18th-century Persian coffee houses, food isn't just nourishment, it's a subtle performance of its own. A boy walks past you balancing a tray that's a miracle of equilibrium, saffron-dusted almonds, a bowl of thick yogurt, and something resembling a melted candlestick but smelling like paradise. You follow your nose and sit at a low table with cushions that have probably seen a century of crumbs. No menus, of course. The fare is whatever the cook decided was possible today. And the cook? Probably someone's grandmother, hidden behind a curtain of steam and muttered curses. A cup of coffee arrives first, naturally. It's not your first tonight, and you know better than to ask for cream or sugar. That's not how it's done. Persian coffee is tar black, often brewed with cardamom, occasionally laced with rosewater, and strong enough to reset your ancestors' sleep cycles. You sip carefully. The coffee house of the 18th century wasn't a full restaurant, but it wasn't just drinks and poetry either. Simple dishes were served, lentil stews, flatbreads, pickled vegetables, grilled meats. Everything shared, everything savored. You tear a piece of bread and dip it into a plate of kashki bejimchan, a warm eggplant dip with whey, garlic, and fried mint. The flavors are earthy, tangy, and unapologetically ancient. Across from you, a man sprinkles dried lime into his soup and sighs contentedly. Tastes like my wedding, he says. You don't ask questions. Food here isn't fast. It's a ritual. A bridge between strangers. A pause between ideas. The man beside you tears a piece of bread, dips it in your plate without asking, and says, you eat like a man who listens. You smile and decide that's a compliment. There's a quiet etiquette to dining in these spaces, one that's never written down but always enforced. Don't hoard. Don't rush. Share if you're asked. Offer if someone looks too long. And never, ever comment on how someone eats unless you want to be politely ignored for the rest of the evening. Historians still argue whether these food customs emerged from scarcity or generosity. Maybe both. Maybe they're leftovers from nomadic codes of hospitality, passed down through generations like a family recipe with no measurements. Someone brings out a samovar, a towering contraption of metal and fire, used for brewing tea strong enough to resurrect the dead. Around it gather a few elderly men who seem to have claimed the tea-pouring duties as a sacred rite. They pour from great height, letting the golden stream arc into tiny glasses. It's a performance, yes, but also an offering. You're handed a glass. The tea is dark, fragrant, and scalding hot. A lump of sugar is placed on your tongue before you sip. It melts slowly, altering the bitterness just enough. The result? Sweetness that arrives late but lingers long. Like a good story, Beside you, two men argue, gently, about whether the new batch of pastries tastes like last month's or not. One claims the almonds are fresher. The other counters that the rosewater is overused. A third, the tiebreaker, simply declares, "I miss my mother," and suddenly everyone goes quiet, nodding solemnly. That's the thing about food in a coffee house, it's nostalgic. Every bite is a memory with seasoning. A whisper from a time when someone else stirred the pot and told you when to eat. It wraps you in something older than recipes. You notice a boy, 10, maybe 11, serving tea with a seriousness that borders on religious. His movements are precise, almost ceremonial. He bows slightly with each pour. You ask why he's so formal. An older man nearby answers for him, he's apprenticing. One day, he'll inherit this space. You look again, and yes, there's pride in the boy's posture. He's not just serving. He's learning the rhythms of hospitality, the silent cues, the weight of a full tray, the perfect heat for a second pour. This is his school. No chalk, no paper. Just service and observation. In one corner, a man unwraps a bundle of dried fruits and nuts. He places them in the center of the table and walks away. No one asks why. They just eat. Later, you're told it's in memory of his father, who used to do the same thing every Tuesday. No plaque. No announcement. Just almonds and figs as a quiet tribute. A fringe theory floats your way, half joking, half serious, that the cook behind the curtain is actually a retired noblewoman who lost her estate and found solace in feeding poets and merchants. She seasons with regret, someone says, grinning. It's nonsense. Probably. But the stew does taste like longing. You hear a soft clatter and turn to see a game of backgammon resuming, fueled by pastries stuffed with pistachio and honey. The rules of the game are known. So are the rules of the table. But everything in between, the laughter, the silence, the brief touch of hands over shared plates, is where the culture lives. Here in the 18th century Persian coffee house, eating isn't private. It's participatory. You aren't a customer. You're a guest. Possibly even a witness to something sacred wrapped in fried dough. A last plate arrives. It's zoalbia, a crispy, syrup-drenched spiral of fried batter that gleams like gold in the lantern light. You tear off a piece, let it stick to your fingers, and eat it slowly. The world outside, whatever it is, doesn't matter here. You're full, but not just of food. You're full of warmth. Of stories. Of time. And still, somewhere in the shadows, the samovar hisses softly. You stretch, just a little. Not enough to be rude, etiquette, remember, but enough to feel your bones resettle after the food. A soft clink of teacups and a faint lull in conversation signal a shift in the room's energy. The belly is full, the stories have landed, and now comes the debate. No shouting. No podiums. Just eyes narrowed, fingers drumming against worn wood, and sentences that begin like, "with all due respect." You settle in as two men, one with ink-stained fingertips, the other in a cloak slightly too fine for this place, begin a verbal spar over Persian administrative reforms under Karim Khan Zand. Riveting, right? Yet somehow, you lean forward. See, in the 18th century Persian coffee house, this kind of debate isn't unusual. It's expected. Encouraged. Celebrated. These houses were more than places to sip and gossip, they were proto-public forums, where commoners could flex their intellects and even shape public opinion. One historian called them the smoky salons of the streetwise. Another claimed they were the birthplace of Iran's earliest democratic impulses. Yet, as usual, scholars still argue whether these debates had any lasting political power or if they were just a form of mental sport. Here's the reality, they were both. Across the room, a younger man challenges a statement about poetry under the Safavids. He's corrected, not condescendingly, but like a mentor nudging a student. Rumi wasn't Persian, but Persian was his language, someone adds, and everyone murmurs their approval. Nuance is the currency here. Someone else slides a wooden tray over. On it, little tokens, inked slips of paper, and a charcoal pencil. This, you're told, is a kind of impromptu vote. If a debate draws a crowd, the listeners can weigh in. Not with who won, but whose argument felt most grounded, most poetic, or most useful. Tonight's topic seems tame, but scratch the surface and you'll find currents of revolution. A debate about the fairness of grain pricing. Actually a discussion on tax inequality. An argument over Sufi philosophy. Probably a veiled critique of how local clerics interpret power. Everything means more than it seems. You glance up. A man in the corner is sketching, not the debaters, but their hand gestures, midair as if casting spells. He's capturing the motion of thought itself. The rules of engagement are mostly unspoken but ironclad. You may interrupt, but never insult. You may question, but never humiliate. Raise your voice too much, and you're met with silence, a punishment worse than scolding. One particularly lively moment comes when someone suggests that coffee itself was responsible for an intellectual renaissance across Persia. Before caffeine, we dreamed. After caffeine, we remembered, he says. Half the room claps. The other half rolls their eyes. Someone else suggests that too much coffee has made everyone too jittery to think clearly. That earns a polite chuckle and a single dramatic yawn in response. You sip again, your third or fourth cup, who's counting, and realize this place is buzzing not from caffeine, but from collective curiosity. The kind that doesn't demand degrees or titles. Just attention. Nearby, two women, veils loose, eyes alert, whisper their own assessments. You catch phrases, he misquoted Hafiz, and, I liked her point about the caravans. The debate isn't limited to men. Not here. Not always. In fact, in some cities, coffee houses were known to host gatherings where women discussed poetry, philosophy, and yes, even politics. These spaces weren't always equal, but they were permeable. Ideas leaked through every curtain and doorway like steam from the kitchen. And the debates? They changed with the times. When dynasties shifted, so did the topics. Under the Qajars, gossip became more political. Under Zand rule, legal questions took center stage. And in some houses, you could hear a full dissection of Western innovations, like steam power or clockwork machines, paired with verses from ancient texts. The past and future collapsed into conversation. A quirky tidbit, one popular coffee house in Shiraz was infamous for its regular debate nights where winners earned eggplants. No gold, no prestige. Just a bag of vegetables. Why? Because the wise must always be fed, someone once wrote in jest. You smile. You'd debate for an eggplant, too, if the arguments were this rich. As you listen, the tone shifts again. A younger woman raises a question, tentatively at first, about the moral weight of wealth in Sufi literature. Her voice is steady, but her eyes flicker, scanning for disapproval. There is none. Instead, an older man nods deeply and responds with a quote, "Do not wear silk upon your back if the hearts of the poor wear thorns." No one knows who said it first. Doesn't matter. It lands. The debate rolls on. You think back to today. In your own world, you debate through screens and comment threads. Arguments are quick, clipped, often cruel. But here, in this hazy air, there is time. There is space. A man finishes a sentence and takes a full breath before the next person begins. No rush. No need to win. You're not just witnessing dialogue. You're part of it. Even in silence, your presence affirms the rhythm. You are one heartbeat in the living organism of shared thought. The tea's gone cold. No one minds. Someone pours fresh, without breaking stride. Another person rewrites a line of poetry to better fit their point. A debate about crop rotation turns into a meditation on divine balance. Somewhere in the back, the storyteller snores gently. A strange comfort settles over you. This is what thinking can feel like. Not lonely. Not frantic. But communal, curious, and slow. Slow enough to savor. And as the arguments stretch into the night, you realize something lovely and a little unfair. You don't have to agree to be part of the truth. You exhale. Deep, slow. Like someone letting go of a thought they've held too long. The debate dissolves, not with a final winner, but with a quiet nod from one of the elders and the soft click of a tea glass returning to its saucer. That's how endings work here, not with applause, but with mutual exhaustion. You shift slightly, brushing your fingertips along the embroidered edge of the cushion beneath you. Your fingers come away dusty with age. As you glance around, something catches your eye in the far corner of the room, a curious low shelf stacked with papers, scrolls, even the odd leather-bound book. Ah! The unofficial library. Every proper 18th-century Persian coffee house had one, or at least a few tattered manuscripts that passed through hands more frequently than the teacups. You shuffle closer, feet quiet on the tiled floor, and begin thumbing through the assortment. It's a strange collection. A handwritten prayer. A receipt for 7 sheep. A page of Rumi copied and recopied until the script fades into pure muscle memory. Historians still argue whether these shelves were curated by the owners or built slowly by generous regulars who simply left behind what they no longer needed, or couldn't bear to throw away. You pick up a scroll and unroll it carefully. It's a Mathnawi, a long, rhymed poem, with marginalia scribbled by at least 3 different people in 3 distinct hands. One note corrects a date. Another adds a cheeky limerick in the margin. A third, barely legible, reads, "Heard it sung once in Yazd. Still hurts." Books here aren't sacred, exactly. They're alive. Handled. Annotated. Debated. This is not a scholar's library locked behind glass. It's a public garden of ink, and anyone who knows how to read, or pretend to, can pluck a sentence and make it bloom again. An old man next to you squints at a tiny codex filled with herbal remedies. "This one cures melancholy," he says, tapping the page with a cracked fingernail. "Also foot fungus. Convenient." He winks. You nod respectfully. You don't question the overlap. The library corner isn't just for the educated. It's where the young learn to fake wisdom, and the wise remember how much they've forgotten. One boy recites a love poem under his breath, mispronouncing half the words but blushing all the same. His friend teases him, then immediately begs to borrow the book. You notice that many of the texts are poems, some famous, some clearly self-written and never published beyond these walls. Apparently, this coffee house doubles as a poetry Dropbox. Bring your verses, leave them here, and hope someone reads them aloud one night. That's the dream. There's a worn notebook with its spine barely clinging to life. Inside are tiny portraits drawn in ink, customers, likely. One man has the note, "Always orders too much food," scribbled under his likeness. Another sketch, perhaps of a regular who passed away, is labeled only, "He said nothing, but always listened." You set it down gently. Near the bottom of the stack, you find something rare, a map. Not of Persia, not even of any real geography. This one outlines the city of thought as imagined by a long-dead poet. There's a district for longing, a bridge of riddles, and an alley called doubt that leads nowhere. A cartographic joke, maybe. Or a prayer. A man behind you coughs. Not sick, just clearing the air. "That one's been here longer than I have," he mutters. We all get lost in it, eventually. The library here doesn't care if you read right to left or left to right. No one corrects you. No one quizzes you. It's not school. It's soft. Gentle. Like a warm cat you didn't expect to sit on your lap but now don't want to disturb. A fringe story floats up, no one confirms it, of course, but everyone knows it. They say one coffee house in Isfahan had a book so beloved that people wrote songs about it. When it was stolen, the owner wept for a week, and every patron wore black ribbons until it mysteriously returned, tucked behind the sugar jar, as if it had never left. You believe it. Why not? In this place, books are both entertainment and identity. Reciting a few couplets from Ferdowsi earns you respect. Quoting your own verses. Risky, but potentially glorious. And quoting the man 3 tables over, who once wrote a single perfect line about lantern light reflecting in a lover's eye. That might just make you legend. You sit again, one of the thinner volumes in hand. It's barely 30 pages, scrawled in inconsistent ink, some of it smeared by what might be tears, or maybe just clumsy fingers. The title? Things I Meant to Say Before the Tea Cooled. You don't read all of it. Just enough. A passage about someone too shy to speak up during a debate. A line about hoping someone remembers the shape of your laughter. A footnote that simply reads, check the stew before midnight. You close the book slowly. Maybe someone meant that to be funny. Or maybe it's code for something much heavier. You look up. Around the room, no one notices that you've just fallen in love with a stranger's scribbles. That's normal here. Everyone's doing it, all the time. At the far end of the room, a man begins to read aloud from a dog-eared epic. His voice is raspy, but measured, and soon the rustle of pages dies down. Even the tea slurps grow quieter. One by one, heads tilt in his direction, not out of obligation, but like flowers leaning toward sun. It's another tale of lovers separated by geography, time, and an unspoken argument over how best to cook lamb. The metaphors are elaborate. The vowels, stretched like silk threads. You don't catch every word. You don't need to. The rhythm wraps around you, lulling you into a soft focus. The smell of old paper lingers, faintly peppery. Your feet warm under the table. A few pages flutter nearby like wings folding into rest. The books aren't just objects here. They're echoes. Continuations of conversations that began long before you arrived and will outlast even the strongest cup of tea. You leave the library corner reluctantly. But you'll come back. Everyone always does. You sink back into your cushion again, the floor warm from the body heat of hours-long conversation. Somewhere behind you, a chair creaks, and the scent of cardamom grows stronger as a fresh pot of tea is set to steep. There's a lull now, a pause in the rhythm of the evening, as if the room is taking a breath. And in that breath, you notice something curious. The silence isn't silent at all. A faint string plucks. Then another. And before you know it, a melody unspools like golden thread from the fingers of a man in the corner, tuning his tar, a long-necked, double-bowl instrument that hums like a sleeping cat when stroked just right. His robe is plain, but his hands are all flair and finesse. The first notes are tentative, as if asking permission. The room grants it with a shift in posture, a turning of ears. Music in the coffee house isn't scheduled. It arrives when it pleases, when the atmosphere calls for it. And tonight, after the debates and scrolls and stories, it calls. You close your eyes as the song begins. Not quite classical, not quite folk, it dances in between, a tune passed down through so many mouths and hands that no one remembers who first composed it. Some say it was a butcher's daughter. Others claim it came from a traveling mystic who only played for dogs and infants. Historians, naturally, still argue whether these musical traditions were formalized or improvised. Some surviving sheet music suggests structured scales and modes, dasgas, while other accounts describe coffee house musicians as rebels, bending every note just enough to make purists twitch. All you know is, it works. The music meanders, full of playful flutters and sudden dips into melancholy. A woman with henna-stained fingertips joins in with a daff, a large round drum lined with tiny rings that shimmer when shaken. Her rhythm is steady, grounding the string player's flights of fancy like a heartbeat under a dream. You watch as heads begin to sway, shoulders loosen, and even the storyteller, now roused from his nap, taps a sandal against the leg of his stool. This isn't background music. It's participatory. Not in claps or chants, but in how it changes your breath, your blinking. You're in it, whether you meant to be or not. A boy nearby hums along, off-key but with conviction. His father shushes him with a smile, then mouths the next verse himself. You didn't know there were verses. But of course there are. These songs tell stories: lovers separated, kings betrayed, markets burned, and onions stolen. There's always an onion. One particularly well-loved tune is about a man who fell in love with a woman because she could peel garlic faster than anyone in 3 provinces. The song ends in tragedy, naturally, when she's kidnapped by a caravan of jealous cooks. You laugh, too loudly. No one minds. The musicians play on, now joined by a ney, a reed flute whose sound floats above the others like a ghost peeking through curtains. Its player is barely moving. Just eyes closed, cheeks puffed, fingers dancing with patient precision. One man leans over to you. This ney, he says, was carved from the same reed that grew beside Rumi's grave. You raise your eyebrows. He grins. Probably not. But that's what we like to say. In another coffee house, one across town, older, smokier, there's a story of a blind Santa player who could summon birds with his music. They say sparrows would land near him mid-song, chirp in perfect harmony, then vanish before anyone else could notice. That house, apparently, banned him for causing avian distractions. You wonder what that sounded like. Tonight's music turns slower. More sorrowful. A minor key enters, and suddenly you're back in your memories, watching someone walk away in slow motion under a sunset that never actually looked that dramatic in real life. That's the thing about music here, it doesn't just entertain. It sneaks under your ribs and tickles feelings you forgot you had. A tune about war somehow reminds you of your mother. A rhythm about the harvest makes you think about last week's grocery list. Emotion is never direct. It travels sideways. There's no stage. No velvet curtain. The musicians sit cross-legged like everyone else, sharing sips of tea between songs and nodding politely when someone compliments a solo. Their fame, if they have any, is purely local. You either know them, or you don't. But when they play, everyone knows why they're here. One curious custom. If a musician fumbles, misses a note, stumbles on a rhythm, no one corrects them. Instead, they mimic the mistake deliberately, then build a new variation around it. It's considered bad etiquette to pretend the mistake didn't happen. Better to own it. Embellish it. Make it part of the performance. You find that comforting. By now, the room feels different. Softer, hazier. Not from smoke, though there's some of that. But from the slow drift of shared melody. Like the walls are relaxing. Like the ceiling forgot it had to hold up the sky. The tar player finishes a particularly intricate passage, then bows his head. The drum taps one last time. The ney sings a final sigh. And for a moment, everything is still. Then someone claps. Just once. And the room responds with a wave of quiet appreciation. Not roaring applause, just a murmur of thanks. A sigh of, yes, that was exactly what we needed. You stretch your legs. The floor beneath you still hums faintly from the last vibrations. The woman with the daff laughs softly and tucks the drum under her arm like a beloved pet. The musicians pour tea and resume casual conversation, as if they hadn't just rearranged everyone's internal architecture. You glance around. No one asks for another song. No one begs for an encore. It's enough. It happened. And that's what matters. The night rolls on, and in the quiet that follows the music, Even the sound of your own heartbeat feels like part of the ensemble. You shift in your seat, still echoing with that last lingering note. The coffee house hasn't gone quiet, not exactly, it's just changed keys. The energy now is soft, inward. Like the room collectively decided to exhale. You trace the rim of your tea glass and let your mind wander, only to land on something you hadn't noticed before. The walls. You tilt your head, eyes narrowing. They're not just painted, they're layered. Centuries of soot, handprints, and decorative flair. There's a mural behind the samovar that seems to depict a lion playing chess with a rooster, don't ask, and another near the ceiling that shows a man pouring coffee so theatrically, his arm seems dislocated for dramatic effect. But those are just the obvious bits. What draws your eye are the smaller details, charms tucked into cracks in the plaster. Scraps of poetry inked onto the backs of receipts and stuck to beams. Carved initials. A corner where someone once outlined their hand, child-sized, and wrote, "Amir was here." 1723, you run your fingers over it, faintly. Amir's probably not here now. But he was. Coffee house walls are never blank. They're layered journals, gossip boards, art galleries, and sometimes memorials. Historians still argue whether this custom emerged from religious storytelling traditions or if it simply evolved because people needed a place to stick things where they'd be remembered. Either way, it works. One wall in particular seems unusually cluttered. You wander over and realize it's what locals call the memory patch, a living collage of the neighborhood's past. There's an old wedding invitation pinned beside a faded drawing of a goat in a hat. A miniature carpet, clearly handmade, hangs alongside a torn photograph of a man with one eyebrow and the world's most determined mustache. This isn't decoration. It's documentation. You find a recipe scrawled on the wall in a mess of spices and ink. It claims to be the best lentil stew ever made. Someone, in red pen, has crossed out best and written second best. Yours is better, mother. There's no name. Just a date, 1778. Another wall carries dueling love letters, written at least a decade apart. The first is a confession, signed, "Your cinnamon-eyed fool." The second? A brutal, one-line reply, "He left. I stayed. The tea is still warm." Ouch. Someone else added a smiley face beneath it. Of course. You spot a crooked shelf lined with miniature trinkets, a broken teacup, a ring with no stone, a child's marble, an old coin worn smooth by too many pockets. Each item bears a little paper tag with handwriting that ranges from eloquent to chaotic. My uncle's last story. Found in a shoe. I forgave her the day after this. There's even a quill nailed to the wall, dried ink still crusting the nib. Underneath, someone scribbled, "This wrote 31 poems and 2 lies." You can't help smiling. The custom of leaving behind objects, some symbolic, some utterly mundane, goes back centuries in Persian coffee houses. A blend of superstition, sentimentality, and pure human messiness. Some believe that an item left behind holds the memory of a conversation. Others say it blesses the next user with insight. And some just forget their stuff and invent stories later. All are welcome theories. The fringe tale. One coffee house reportedly had a section of wall so crammed with offerings that it collapsed. Miraculously, no one was hurt, except, perhaps, someone's pride when their love letter was found underneath the rubble, addressed to 3 different people. You sit again, back against a pillar. The wall near your elbow carries a long list of names and dates. A roster, perhaps. Or a scorecard. Or a ledger of people who once owed money and paid it off by sweeping the floor. No one explains. That's part of the charm. Above the entrance, a cloth banner droops gently. On it, embroidered in fading gold thread, "Come in if your soul needs to stretch." That might be the most accurate slogan ever written. What's interesting is how few visitors treat the walls with reverence. They're not behind glass, not guarded. Kids touch them. Men lean against them mid-argument. One woman rests her forehead on a particularly poetic corner and sighs. These aren't artifacts. They're still breathing. In fact, you watch someone quietly add to them. She's elderly, hunched slightly, with the kind of slow confidence you only get after several lifetimes of watching people try too hard. She unfurls a piece of parchment, carefully, lovingly, and uses a bit of paste to affix it between two overlapping drawings. Then she steps back, nods once, and walks away. You inch forward. The parchment reads. Today, he returned the teacup he borrowed in 1802. It had a crack, but so did I. Still held together. Underneath, someone else has written, still holding. You feel like crying. Or laughing. Or both. You glance up, and above you, dangling from a nail in the ceiling beam, is an old key. No explanation. Just hanging there. Someone long ago decided that meant something, and the room agreed. The key doesn't unlock anything physical. But you imagine it might be the key to something even stranger, like remembering how to say what you mean, or finding the courage to admit you were wrong about that one thing that ended badly and still shows up in your dreams sometimes. This is how history survives in a coffee house. Not in ledgers or government archives, but in crumbs of real life stuck lovingly to the walls. It's messy. Personal. Full of inside jokes and stories no one else will ever understand, but beautiful in a way no museum could replicate. As the lamps dim ever so slightly, the walls glow with a soft warmth. You swear they lean inward, listening. And in that moment, surrounded by centuries of scribbles and stains, you realize, these walls have heard more confessions than any priest, more secrets than any lover, and more laughter than any king's court. And still, they never talk back. You remain nestled against that pillar, reluctant to move, because you're convinced if you stay still enough, the walls might whisper their secrets. They never do, of course, not in words. But the feeling that they might. That's enough. A waiter passes by with a fresh tray of saffron cake, and the smell alone jolts your attention back to the present. Food. Yes. Somehow, in the hours you've been lounging, sipping, and sighing, you forgot to eat anything of substance. That changes now. Persian coffee houses, despite the name, aren't all about coffee. In fact, you realize, you've seen more tea than anything else tonight. But what you haven't yet explored fully is the food, its etiquette, its quirks, and its powerful, almost magical role in this delicate ecosystem of conversation and camaraderie. You reach for a cube of that saffron cake, Shirini Zard, and the sponge practically sighs against your fingertips. It's sweet but earthy, like a compliment from an elder. Nothing too showy, just enough to make you smile. Food in the coffee house is comfort. Not performance. You won't find silver platters or 10-course meals here. No one flinches if you lick your fingers. And no one cares if you eat in silence or talk with your mouth half full, as long as you're not rude about it. This isn't a palace. It's a shared hearth. The real rule. Always offer someone else a bite. You barely take a second nibble before a man next to you gestures toward a plate of dried figs. Try these, he says. They're from Kerman. Sun-kissed by the same light that made my wife fall in love with me. You take one. It's chewy, floral, dusted with something that might be crushed rose petals or just as overactive imagination. Mainstream fact. Most coffee houses served only a few staple dishes, hearty stews like abgusht, pickled vegetables, flatbreads so fresh they still steam when split, and the occasional sweet to balance the bitterness of the coffee, or the bitterness of politics. There was even a time when boiled eggs were considered the ultimate delicacy if sprinkled with sumac and gossip. Now, here's a fringe detail for you. In one particular tea house outside Shiraz, it said that patrons used to hide romantic notes inside stuffed grape leaves. If you unwrapped one and found a message, you were required to write back, no matter who it was. Some marriages apparently began this way. Others ended when a poet tried it with someone else's sister. You try not to think too hard about the grape leaves in your bowl. What strikes you isn't just the food itself, but how it's served. There's a rhythm to it. A dance of trays and nods. The server never asks what you want, he simply watches you for a moment, reads your body like a well-thumbed novel, and brings what fits. You're tense. You get something warm. You're tired. Something sweet. You're clearly overthinking everything and spiraling into existential dread. That calls for pistachios. You crack one open. It laughs back in crunch. There's a scholarly debate, naturally, about whether these servers were trained in some formalized hospitality code or if they were simply intuitive, masters of micro-expression and emotional weather patterns. The truth, as usual, probably lives somewhere in between. You remember now a story someone told earlier in the evening, that in the 1760s, a legendary coffee house cook named Aga Morid once fed an entire protest movement on nothing but lentils, yogurt, and very persuasive honey cakes. No records survive to confirm this, of course. But it's one of those tales people tell with such conviction, you'd feel rude disagreeing. You try the yogurt. It's tart, thick, and cool enough to make your tongue hum. And just like that, your focus shifts again. Not to the taste, but the act of sharing it. A young man across from you tears off a piece of bread and hands it to the elderly woman beside him without looking. She tears it in half and passes one piece to the quiet boy on her right. No words. No acknowledgement. Just a practiced ballet of generosity. Here, you never take the last piece without offering it 3 times. You never spoon from the center of a shared dish unless invited. And if someone pours tea for you, you pour it for them next time, even if it's 20 minutes later. These rituals aren't enforced. No one scolds. But everyone watches. Because here, etiquette isn't about manners, it's about memory. About honoring the invisible threads that connect all of you in that smoky, sugar-dusted space. There's even a custom of offering food to the unseen, leaving the first bite of a dish on a small plate near the doorway, for wandering spirits, ancient guests, or just forgotten souls who might be listening. The plate tonight holds half a date and a few chickpeas. You wonder who they're for. Maybe Amir, from the wall. Maybe the guy with the love letters. Maybe just the memory of yourself, walking in several hours ago, not knowing how much this place would shape you. Someone sneezes. Instantly, 3 people say, "Bless you." One of them adds, "May your stew never sour." You chuckle into your fig. Even the toasts here are edible. To a bread that doesn't burn. To a coffee that never cools. To a stomach that forgives your past decisions. That one, frankly, feels personal. The night wears on, but the food keeps coming, slowly, gently, like waves lapping at the edge of sleep. And as you sample each new dish, you start to realize something surprising. It's not just about eating. It's about being fed. Taken care of. Remembered. You dab your lips with a napkin that's definitely seen better days, and you settle back against your cushion again. Someone hands you one last sweet, flaky, syrup-soaked, definitely illegal in at least 3 modern diets. You bite in, and sugar floods your brain like a lullaby. You're full. Not just stomach full. Soul full. And as the tray clinks away into the kitchen and someone chuckles nearby about a stew that once caused a marriage proposal, you think, yes. Yes, this is what every meal should feel like. Your stomach hums, your limbs feel like warm dough, and the chatter around you has dropped into that special register, low, lullaby deep, like the sound of late night wrapped in fabric. The coffee house doesn't empty so much as it exhales. People drift out in 2s and 3s, quietly, as though afraid to disturb the spell of digestion and lingering stories. You're not quite ready to leave. Not because of the tea or the murals or even the fact that someone just offered you a date stuffed with cinnamon and candied rose petals, but because of the people. Or more accurately, the characters. Because Persian coffee houses, more than anything, were home to personalities. Wild, opinionated, lovable, tragic, unbearable, electric personalities. And they weren't just guests, they were the atmosphere. At the corner table sits a man with a voice like gravel soaked in honey. You've heard him speak 3 times tonight, and each time people leaned in. Not because of what he said, necessarily, but because of how he said it. He's a knackle, a storyteller, by trade. Not hired, not scheduled. He simply shows up, and people listen. There's a fringe rumor that some of these guys were so compelling, rival cafes tried to poach them with free kebabs and promises of quieter audiences. One even faked a family emergency just to lure a storyteller across town. The man refused, of course. Said his loyalty was to the acoustics of his usual corner. But it wasn't just knackles who ruled these spaces. Every coffee house had its unofficial council, a rotating panel of the hilariously outspoken. There's the man who always sits with one shoe off. He claims it helps him channel the truth. There's the lady who argues politics with anyone breathing. And the older gentleman who hasn't bought his own tea in 15 years because he always predicts the weather correctly. He doesn't, but no one wants to jinx it. You learn quickly that rank in a coffee house isn't about money or lineage, it's about narrative weight. If your presence makes the room tilt slightly, if your stories are passed around like bread, if your opinions can hush a conversation or start one from scratch, you're royalty here. Mainstream historians agree that these human fixtures played a significant role in shaping public sentiment during key periods of Persian history, especially during the Qajar era. Coffee houses became informal centers of news, gossip, debate, and even activism. Not because people trusted the newspapers, but because they trusted Reza with the loud eyebrows to tell it straight. Sometimes you hear snippets that make you smile, the Shah's new tax is just a poorly dressed thief. Or, my cousin's goat has more charisma than half the cabinet. Or, if this bread gets any thinner, we'll be slicing air. Wit is currency. Hyperbole is grammar. There's an ongoing scholarly debate about how much influence these unofficial voices had over real policy or political outcomes. But even if they didn't change laws, they definitely changed minds, and that's often more dangerous. One tale goes that a certain coffee house in Isfahan became so notorious for sharp-tongued patrons that royal spies were assigned to sit quietly and report back. They were terrible at it. Apparently, one spy was ousted because he wore shoes that didn't squeak properly, a dead giveaway he wasn't local. You chuckle into your tea. The squeaky shoe test. Genius. You also begin to notice how generational the energy is. Elders sit alongside teenagers. No one's trying to shoo anyone out. Instead, stories pass from table to table, old to young, like recipes with just enough mystery to stay interesting. You hear a boy misquote a poem. A man gently corrects him. The boy grins and says, "But my version rhymes better." The man concedes. Even the teasing is a form of affection here. Someone messes up a proverb, and 5 people immediately chime in with mockery so polished it practically sparkles. A woman to your left is being roasted, lovingly, for mixing up a famous philosopher's name with that of a butcher. She laughs hardest of all. And when someone walks in, a bit unsteady, obviously new, they're greeted not with suspicion, but with curiosity. Where'd you come from? Who do you know here? What story are you carrying? That's the unspoken rule of the Persian coffee house, everyone brings something. Some bring news. Some bring grief. Some bring stale jokes or fresh bread. Some bring quiet. Some bring critique. And some bring nothing but a hunger to belong. All are fed. You look around again and realize there are no formal seats of power here. No stage. No velvet rope. Just the gentle orbit of influence, of attention. Someone's opinion matters because it matters, not because of a title. There's a word that gets used often in these spaces, mardomi, which loosely translates to, of the people. To be mardomi is to be accessible, decent, grounded. Not pretentious. Not performative. It's the highest praise in the room, and also the most democratic. You can't buy it. You have to live it. One man spills his tea. No one flinches. Another man stands to speak and trips slightly. 3 hands steady him without a word. A woman sings softly under her breath between sips of mint tea. No one hushes her. This place isn't a sanctuary in the spiritual sense. It's more, a soft net for the small collapses we all carry. And every character, eccentric, sarcastic, brilliant, messy, helps tie that net. You watch a pair of twins play chess with napkin scraps and an olive pit. They argue fiercely over rules neither of them remember. An old man insists he once beat a Russian general in backgammon with nothing but luck and a piece of string. A merchant stands to recite a joke so long-winded and winding that everyone forgets the punchline halfway through, but laughs anyway, out of respect for his commitment. Even the quiet ones are part of it. A girl in the corner sketches each table without looking up. A boy with a crooked smile hums into his teacup. Their silence isn't absence, it's a different flavor of presence. And just when you think the night has stretched as far as it can go, a storyteller raises his hand gently and begins. There once was a man who couldn't lie, because every time he did, his tea turned bitter. And just like that, the room stills. Not silent. Just suspended. You lean in, smiling, and realize you've been waiting for this. Not the story, necessarily. But the moment when all these voices, these personalities, these beating hearts lean together in shared breath and say, without saying it, we are here. And we are listening. Outside, the sky has softened into a velvet ash, the kind of pre-dawn gray that holds its breath before the first bird dares a chirp. Inside the coffee house, the coals are fading in their braziers, painting flickers of sleepy orange across tile and cheekbone. You feel it now. Not just the weight of the night, but the depth of it. Like you've stepped into a pocket of time that ignored the centuries, shrugged off the clocks, and simply was. This is the end. But not the exit. Because the final moments of a Persian coffee house night are their own kind of sacred. Not solemn. Not dramatic. Just slow. You shift in your cushion, feeling how your body has molded into the space like wax into a mold. Around you, people stretch, yawn, and begin that dance of delayed departure. One man refills his tea for the 4th time, not because he wants more, but because the act of pouring gives him a reason to stay 5 minutes longer. The staff doesn't shoo anyone away. Instead, they begin to clean around the still seated. A gentle sweeping. A low clang of trays. The unspoken understanding that leaving isn't a moment, it's a process. Someone behind you hums an old lullaby. You don't know the words, but the melody curls around your thoughts like steam. And that's when you start to notice something odd. People begin to speak less. Not because there's nothing to say, but because they've said enough. All the opinions, the arguments, the flirtations, the poetry, the laughter, they've landed where they needed to. Now it's the turn of the quiet. Mainstream historians would tell you that Persian coffee houses never truly closed in the modern sense. They dissolved. People filtered out like moonlight through lattice. Regulars learned when to vanish before dawn, and newcomers followed their lead, slowly, sheepishly, soothed by the communal hush. But fringe accounts describe something even stranger. There are rumors of coffee houses that shifted at nightfall, spaces that turned dimmer, gentler, almost spiritual. One report from the late 18th century describes a coffee house in Yazd where, after midnight, no one spoke above a whisper, and the storyteller recited only dreams. Actual dreams, collected during the week, turned into parables. It said the regulars believed that listening to another's dream without judgment cleansed the soul. You like that idea? There's also talk of a tea house near Tabriz where people came not to speak, but to weep. Quietly. Respectfully. A kind of morning salon. They'd sip tea, press warm cloths to their eyes, and leave lighter than they arrived. The practice wasn't mocked or medicalized, it was honored. The way you'd honor a thunderstorm. And then there's this place. This unnamed, unassuming little den you've inhabited all night. Here, no one weeps or whispers dreams. But there's a palpable reverence in the air, like the final note of a long song that no one wants to interrupt. Even the tea has changed. It's weaker now, intentionally. More water than brew. A gentle signal to your body that stimulation time is over. The night has passed. It's time to wind down. You cradle your last cup like it's a memory. Someone across the room clicks their tongue. Another answers with a soft, throat-cleared ahem. Not language, exactly. But still communication. It's almost tender. And then someone does something surprising. They begin to sweep around your feet, not hurried, not passive-aggressive, just suggestive. A light reminder that this moment has been lovely. And finite. You nod in gratitude and rise slowly. Your knees crack. The cushion resists you, like a clingy child not ready to let go. But you stretch, tuck your scarf tighter, and begin the slow goodbye. People nod at you as you pass, not with formality, but with shared understanding. We were here together, their eyes say. Wasn't that something? You pass the mural again, the dervish, the lion, the fisherman casting his net of stars. And now, in this muted light, they seem less like decoration and more like memory. Historians still debate whether these images were coded symbols, messages about power, resistance, love, or simply art for beauty's sake. Either way, they've seen more than you ever will. You bow slightly to the wall. Just in case. At the threshold, you pause. The air outside is cool. The street lamp flickers. A cat darts past your feet, off on a mission only cats understand. Behind you, the coffee house breathes its final sigh for the night. And you? You step out. Full. Still curious. Slightly altered. Because for one night, you weren't just an observer of history. You sat in it. You drank from its cups, wiped its syrup from your fingers, laughed at its jokes, and fell a little bit in love with its people. And as the first hint of sunlight slides between rooftops, warming stone and stirring sparrows, you carry that with you. Quietly. Completely. The street is nearly silent now. Your steps are slow, the soles of your shoes kissing the stone like soft drumbeats. You feel the echo of the night trailing behind you, a scent of cardamom, the phantom buzz of conversation, the soft imprint of a cushion beneath you. You pass closed stalls and shuttered windows, their colors dulled by sleep. Everything is at rest. And you are too. Your breath settles deeper in your chest. The tension in your shoulders unspools like thread. Even your thoughts, those noisy little things, have grown lazy, content to drift like steam above an untouched teacup. You think of the people. Their stories. The tiny kindnesses that stitched them together. You think of saffron and laughter and quiet nods. You think of a world that still holds space for slow time, for generous strangers, for places where memory lingers longer than perfume. You don't need to remember every detail. You've lived them. And somewhere inside you now, a little corner of that coffee house remains open, quiet, dim, waiting, for the next moment when the world feels too sharp, too loud, too fast. You'll know where to go. So, let your eyes grow heavy. Let your breath grow long. The night is still holding you. And the story is still steeping. Sleep, traveler. You've wandered far enough for one evening.